Hey traders, Cody from Samurai Trading Academy here. Back doing some of these recaps of my Emini S&P 500 trading after taking last week off. Didn't do as much trading myself, and also had some family in town, so it wasn't a whole ton of time, but we'll be back at it this week, and we'll keep these up for you guys. So first day of my trading for the week, because I don't normally trade on Mondays, which is unfortunate for this one because I missed out on a lot of potential. It actually would have been a really good day, but this one turned out to be okay, and it took some time to get going. And see here early on, it was actually pretty tight, pretty range bound, not a lot of volume in that pre-market. But then things did take off to the upside, and there just really wasn't a good way to latch onto this. And this is our first half hour here, and pretty much all the volume that there was, and it just wasn't a whole lot. But as we pull back in here, normally I would be looking for long, particularly if I've got a good level I can trade off of in here. But with that news event, the high impact news event, don't really want to get right in front of that unless things are really, really clear. And we did make a couple attempts up after that news release, but didn't follow through, and then just pushed down into our pretty clear level from the pre-market here that we had broken through. That was resistance, now acting potentially as some support. Now, there was potentially an opportunity to actually trade up in here. I was hoping to see us hold a little bit higher for what I call a deep level continuation trade, a setup that I look for. We did have some veteran traders take a smaller profit in here off this area. But when it was pushing down through and there was some weakness involved here, I was looking for things to push to the downside. And we finally got that here as we saw some sellers step in, some all right momentum, and things started to push down from there. And so a little bit of an aggressive entry here, but trying to trade off that level. And also just because of the way that we saw some of that selling come in earlier, which we talked about in the class. The only real downside to this trade was that I just wasn't able to open up the target quickly enough. Only had a couple points in mind, and it didn't really start all that aggressively. It was moving to the downside quite nicely, but wasn't just taking off like it did and kind of accelerating as it did a little bit later on here. So sometimes if I can catch a trade like this and it just starts to accelerate, I'll open up that target and be able to catch a really nice run. But it doesn't always happen. Notice how tight and limited things were before. So it's a little difficult to anticipate that we're necessarily going to break with this type of momentum. It can happen sometimes, but a lot of times it won't happen, and price will pull back, and you'll miss out on taking some good profit that you should have had. So I don't really have an issue with getting a little bit less there, but it's definitely an opportunity. If I was a bit more nimble, probably could have caught quite a bit more. And also another opportunity in here as we just broke out with some really high momentum, which is another kind of advanced play that we look at. Saw some of the people, some of the veteran traders that I've worked with that did catch a trade in there. Unfortunately, I missed that one. But then another one in here, we're just, we kind of identified this level, which is pretty obvious here as far as that support, an area that could bring in a little bit more supply into the market, but had to be a bit cautious with the type of moves we were getting here, already reaching 61.8 extension of this bigger move, that we may come back a little bit more. But when that wasn't really happening, a decent short in there. And I took a smaller profit off the table because, as you can see, price getting a lot choppier in here, not nearly as high momentum, not moving quite nearly as well. So just took a little bit less here. Probably could add that extra couple ticks, but again, not really going to be too concerned about that when things start chopping around and the market is already very extended at that point. Then we get into that double bottom and start moving up. Now, there is opportunity to go long in here once you start breaking that market structure. We put in a slight high here. We continue to put in higher highs and higher lows in here, particularly off this area's potential to go long. But I generally prefer to be cautious when I have these really strong moves in one direction. When one side is clearly overwhelming the other, I generally tend to be cautious unless I get a major structural break or some very high momentum on a reversal move. So I was being careful in here, missed out on a little bit, but again, rather be kind of safe than sorry, particularly in these conditions where we're not necessarily seeing a lot of volume, and I don't really want to try to anticipate the market so much. I want to let it break and then just latch on like I did in here. We started to consolidate a bit, but still swinging and still pretty good chance with this sort of momentum of pushing up into a more key level here, and had in mind that this was a potential target, basically almost where it landed, maybe a couple ticks higher. But I was a little concerned about how this might react and just that little break point. So I was happy just to take that profit off the table in there before we reached an area or we could expect to see some sellers step in, and so not really worth continuing to attack that long after a good number of legs there. So overall, a pretty solid day. Definitely required some patience, and pretty happy with it, because even if I trade this pretty aggressively, there's not really too much that you'd be on the wrong side of the market for, because you could have pretty easily gone long in some of these, and even taken a little bit in here on some more aggressive stuff. So pretty by the books type of day, with the exception of really just kind of out of nowhere move to the downside. But hopefully you guys did quite well on the day, banked a nice little profit for yourselves, and I'll see you guys in the next recap tomorrow.